No amount of money can keep a grave sealed forever, though Lorenzo Moretti had certainly tried. New York's most feared capo believed he had finally secured his future, an untouchable emir absolute power, and a perfect Mafia princess fiancée sitting in the passenger seat. But a single red light in the pouring rain shattered that illusion. There on the street corner stood the woman who had decimated his heart 3 years ago. And she wasn't alone. Clinging to her hands were 2 toddlers, staring back with eyes that were undeniably his. This is no longer just a story of lost love. It is a brutal tale of betrayal, bloodlines, and the terrifying lengths a man will go to claim his legacy. The wipers of the blacked-out Mercedes-Maybach S-Class slashed violently against the windshield, fighting a losing battle against the torrential Chicago downpour. Inside the cabin was silent, save for the low hum of the heater and the soft tapping of Sofia Valenti's perfectly manicured nails against her phone screen. Lorenzo Moretti gripped the leather steering wheel, his knuckles white. He was 32 years old, the underboss of the Moretti crime family, and arguably the most dangerous man in the city. He wore a tailored Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's cars, and on his wrist sat a Patek Philippe Nautilus that ticked away the seconds of a life he felt increasingly detached from. "Lorenzo, are you even listening to me?" Sofia's voice was sharp, cutting through the humidity. She didn't look up from her phone. "I said the florist needs to know if we want the white hydrangeas or the lilies for the altar. The wedding is in 2 months. We can't keep stalling." Lorenzo clenched his jaw. "Hydrangeas, Sofia. I don't care." "You never care," she huffed finally, locking her phone and tossing it into her designer purse. "It's our wedding. An alliance between the Morettis and the Valentis. It's the event of the decade. Try to act like you're alive." He didn't answer. He stared at the traffic light on Michigan Avenue. It was glowing a defiant, blurry red. He didn't love Sofia. In their world, love was a liability, a weakness that got men killed. Sofia was a business transaction, a merger of territories. She was beautiful in a cold, statuesque way, with dark hair and calculating eyes, but she had the depth of a puddle. She wanted the title of Don's wife, not the man behind it. The light seemed to take an eternity to change. Lorenzo's eyes wandered to the pedestrian crosswalk. The rain was coming down in sheets now, blurring the neon city lights into streaks of blue and gold. People were sprinting across the street, hunched over under umbrellas, desperate to get out of the cold. Then he saw her. Time didn't just stop. It shattered. She was struggling with a broken umbrella. Her beige trench coat, soaked through her honey-blonde hair, plastered to her cheeks. She looked thinner than he remembered, tired, her shoulders hunched against the wind. Clara Jensen. The only woman he had ever let see the man beneath the monster. The woman who had vanished 3 years ago, without a note, leaving nothing but a cold side of the bed and a hole in his chest that no amount of whiskey could fill. "It can't be," Lorenzo whispered, his voice rough. "What?" Sofia asked, looking out the window. "Who are you looking at? Is it a rival?" Lorenzo didn't hear her. He was paralyzed. He watched as Clara knelt on the wet asphalt, ignoring the freezing rain to zip up the coat of a small child. No, not a child. 2 children. Standing on either side of her were toddlers, a boy and a girl, maybe 2 or 3 years old. They were bundled in matching yellow raincoats, clinging to her hands. As Clara stood up, the boy looked toward the street right at Lorenzo's car. Even through the rain and the tint, even from this distance, Lorenzo felt the air leave his lungs. The boy had dark, curly hair. He had a scowl that mirrored the one Lorenzo saw in the mirror every morning. And his eyes, even from here, Lorenzo knew they were that rare, piercing steel grey. Moretti eyes. The light turned green. Horns blared behind him. A taxi driver shouted something obscenity-laced. "Lorenzo, go!" Sophia snapped. "What is wrong with you?" Lorenzo slammed the gear stick into park. The doors unlocked with a heavy thud. "Lorenzo!" Sophia shrieked as he threw the door open. "Where are you going? It's pouring!" He stepped out into the freezing deluge, the water instantly soaking his expensive suit. He didn't feel the cold. He felt only a roaring thaw in his veins. He slammed the door shut, ignoring Sophia's muffled screams from inside the soundproofed cabin. He ran. He sprinted toward the crosswalk, dodging a delivery truck that skidded on the wet pavement. "Clara!" He roared, his voice tearing through the noise of the city. The woman on the sidewalk froze. She knew that voice. She would know that voice in her sleep, in her nightmares, in hell itself. She turned slowly, terror washing over her pale features. When her eyes met his, the color drained from her face completely. She looked from him to the twins, panic setting in. "No," she mouthed. She grabbed the children's hands tighter. "Run," she whispered to them, though they were too young to understand the urgency. She scooped the girl up into her arms and yanked the boy forward, bolting down the crowded sidewalk. "Clara, stop!" Lorenzo shouted, pushing past a businessman who cursed at him. She didn't stop. She ran with the desperation of a mother protecting her young from a predator. And in her eyes, Lorenzo saw the one thing that hurt more than her leaving fear. She was terrified of him. He closed the distance effortlessly. He was a predator trained to hunt, and she was exhausted, carrying a child. He caught up to her near the entrance of a subway station, grabbing her arm just as she tried to descend the stairs. "Let me go!" she screamed, the sound raw and piercing. The little boy started to cry, hitting Lorenzo's leg with his tiny fists. "Leave Mommy alone, bad man," the boy yelled. Lorenzo looked down. The boy was the spitting image of him at that age. It was like looking into a time machine. He looked back at Clara. Her chest was heaving, water dripping from her nose and chin. She was trembling, but her chin was high, her eyes defiant. 3 years, Clara." Lorenzo growled, his voice low and dangerous, oblivious to the people staring at them. 3 years I thought you were dead. Or worse, that you just didn't care. I did what I had to do. She spat back, pulling her arm from his grip. She held the little girl tighter against her chest. "And them," Lorenzo gestured to the twins. "Are you going to tell me they aren't mine? Look me in the eye and tell me Clara." Clara looked at the twins, then back at him. She took a shaky breath. The rain mingled with the tears starting to form in her eyes. "They aren't yours, Lorenzo," she lied. But her voice cracked. It was a terrible lie. Lorenzo stepped closer, towering over her, shielding her and the children from the rain with his broad body. "Don't lie to me. Not about this. How old are they?" "Lorenzo, please. Just let us go. You have your life. I saw the papers. You're marrying Sofia Valenti. Go back to your princess." "I don't give a damn about Sofia," he snarled. "I want to know why you stole my children and vanished." "I didn't steal them," she cried out, stepping back toward the subway stairs. "I saved them. I saved them from you, from your world, from the target you have on your back every single day." "Lorenzo." A sharp female voice cut through the tension. Lorenzo didn't turn, but he stiffened. Sophia had followed him. She was standing a few feet away, holding a Burberry umbrella, looking at Clara with a mixture of recognition and pure venom. "Well, well," Sophia sneered, walking closer, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. "The waitress returns, and she brought baggage." Clara's face hardened. She pulled the boy closer to her leg. "Sophia," Lorenzo warned, his tone icy. "Get back in the car." "I don't think I will," Sophia said, her eyes scanning the twins. She wasn't stupid. She saw the resemblance immediately. A flash of genuine fear crossed her face, quickly replaced by calculated malice. "So this is the little secret. You didn't just leave, did you, honey? You ran away to breed." "Don't speak to her," Clara snapped. "And don't look at my children." "Or what?" Sophia laughed, though it sounded brittle. "You'll spill coffee on me like in the old days." Lorenzo stepped between them, his back to Sophia facing Clara. "We aren't doing this here. Not on the street." He reached for his phone. "I'm calling Rocco. He'll bring the SUV around. You're coming with me." "I am not going anywhere with you," Clara said, panic rising again. "I have a life, Lorenzo. A quiet life. I won't let you drag us back into the blood and the violence." "You don't have a choice," Lorenzo said, his voice softer now, almost pleading. He looked at the boy who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. "You have my heirs, Clara. You think I can just walk away now? You think my enemies would let you walk away if they knew?" That struck a nerve. Clara froze. "If I know," Lorenzo whispered, leaning down, "then it's only a matter of time before someone else knows. Someone like Dante." At the mention of Dante, the rival boss who had been trying to dismantle the Moretti family for a decade, Clara shuddered. "He doesn't know," she whispered. "Nobody knows. I changed my name. I moved 3 times. I found you by accident at a red light," Lorenzo countered. "Luck runs out. You aren't safe. Not out here." He reached out tentatively and touched the boy's wet cheek. The boy didn't flinch. He leaned into the touch slightly. The connection was electric, undeniable. "Please," Lorenzo said. "Let me protect you. Just for tonight. We can talk. We can figure this out." Clara looked at the subway darkness, then at the luxurious car waiting in the street, then at Sophia's hateful glare, and finally at Lorenzo's desperate eyes. She was trapped. She had been running for 3 years, and now the wall she had built was crumbling. "One night," she whispered. "But not at your house. Not with her." She gestured to Sophia. "Fine," Lorenzo agreed instantly. He turned to Sophia. "Take the car. Go home." "Excuse me," Sophia screeched, her composure cracking. "You are leaving me here in the rain for this gold digger." "Watch your mouth," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "She is the mother of my children. You are a fiancée. I haven't married yet. Know your place, Sophia, or the deal with your father is off." Sophia's mouth snapped shut. She knew when she had lost. Fuming, she turned on her heel and marched back to the Maybach. Lorenzo took off his suit jacket and draped it over Clara's shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of cedar and the expensive cologne she used to love. "Come on," he said, ushering them toward a black SUV that had just pulled up to the curb his security detail. "Let's get them out of the rain." As Clara climbed into the car holding her children, she felt a sinking feeling in her gut. She had saved them from the cold, yes, but she had just walked back into the lion's den. And she knew something Lorenzo didn't. Sophia wasn't just a jealous fiancée. Sophia was the reason Clara had left in the first place. And if Sophia had her way, tonight would be the last night Clara or the twins breathed Moretti air. The ride to the safe house was suffocatingly quiet. The security SUV driven by Rocco Lorenzo's most trusted soldier and childhood friend cut through the Chicago traffic with aggressive precision. Rocco kept glancing in the rear-view mirror, his eyes wide with shock. He had known Clara. He had liked Clara. He had been the one to find Lorenzo drunk and bleeding in an alley the week she left. Seeing her now with two miniature Lorenzos was enough to make the hardened hitman speechless. Lorenzo sat in the front passenger seat, turning his body completely to look at the back. Clara sat in the middle, the twins buckled on either side of her. They had fallen asleep almost instantly, lulled by the warmth of the car and the exhaustion of the day. "Leo and Mia," Clara said softly, answering the question Lorenzo hadn't asked yet. She stroked the boy's hair. "Their names." "Leo," Lorenzo repeated, tasting the name. "After my grandfather." "Coincidence," Clara said quickly, though her blush betrayed her. "Where have you been, Clara? I turned the city upside down. I had private investigators in 3 countries. You ghosted. It was like you never existed." Clara looked out the window at the passing skyscrapers. "That was the point, Lorenzo. To disappear." "Why?" The word was heavy with pain. "We were happy. I was going to propose that night. The ring was in my pocket." Clara laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "Happy Lorenzo, your world was eating me alive. The threats, the late nights, the blood on your shirts when you came home. But I could handle that. I loved you enough to handle the darkness." "Then what?" Lorenzo demanded. "What broke us?" Clara turned to him, her eyes flashing with a sudden intense anger. "You don't know. If I knew, would I be asking? The photos, Lorenzo. The ones sent to my apartment. You and Sophia. In bed. The hotel receipt. The message that said, he's just using you until the merger is final." Lorenzo stared at her, genuinely confused. "What are you talking about? I never touched Sophia until 6 months ago, when our fathers arranged the engagement. 3 years ago, I barely knew who she was." Clara shook her head. "Don't lie. Not anymore. I saw the pictures. They were time stamps, and then the threat came." "What threat?" Lorenzo's voice dropped an octave. The predator was back. "A box," Clara whispered, her hand trembling as she covered Mia's sleeping hand. "On my doorstep. Inside was a dead canary. And a note. Leave tonight or the next box will be big enough for you. I was pregnant, Lorenzo. I had just found out that morning. I was going to tell you at dinner." Lorenzo felt sick. A dead canary. It was an old Mafia warning. It meant someone was singing, or someone needed to be silenced. "I didn't send that," Lorenzo said, his voice shaking with rage. "You think I would threaten the mother of my child? I didn't know what to think," Clara hissed, keeping her voice low so as not to wake the kids. "I saw photos of you cheating. I got a death threat. And when I tried to call you, Rocco answered and said you were busy with the Valenti family. It all added up. I thought you were done with me. I thought if I stayed my babies would be killed." Lorenzo looked at Rocco. Rocco's face was pale in the reflection of the dashboard lights. "Boss," Rocco said, his voice tight. "I never said that. I mean, I might have said you were in a meeting with the Valentis because you were negotiating the shipping routes. But I never blocked her calls." Someone intercepted the calls, Lorenzo realized. The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture that was uglier than he could have imagined. The photos were faked. The threat, It came from inside. Sophia. Clara said the name, tasting like poison. It was her, wasn't it? She wanted the spot. She wanted to be the queen. Sophia is vicious, but she isn't smart enough to pull off a deep fake and a security breach alone 3 years ago. Lorenzo mused, his mind racing. She had help. The car slowed down as they approached a high-security penthouse building on the outskirts of the city, a neutral ground Lorenzo kept for emergencies. "We are going to figure this out," Lorenzo vowed. "But first you need to understand something, Clara. I never stopped looking. I never stopped loving you. And whoever sent that box, whoever took 3 years of my children's lives from me..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes promised a violence that would make the devil pray. As the car parked in the underground garage, Lorenzo got out and opened the back door. He unbuckled Leo carefully. The boy stirred, opening his grey eyes. He looked at Lorenzo, blinked, and then rested his head on Lorenzo's shoulder, sighing contentedly. Lorenzo's heart hammered against his ribs. The weight of the boy in his arms felt like the only thing that had ever mattered. "I've got you," Lorenzo whispered into the boy's hair. They moved toward the elevator, but as the doors closed, Lorenzo's phone buzzed. It was a text message. Unknown number. He shifted Leo to one arm and checked the screen. Attached. A photo of Clara and the twins getting into Lorenzo's SUV just minutes ago. Message: "Cute kids. It would be a shame if history repeated itself. Get rid of them or we will." Lorenzo stared at the phone. They were being watched. Already. "Who is it?" Clara asked, seeing the change in his posture. Lorenzo pocketed the phone, his face a mask of stone. "Nobody. Just business." He wouldn't tell her yet. He wouldn't scare her. But as the elevator rose, Lorenzo Moretti made a silent vow. Tonight the streets of Chicago would run red. He wasn't just a boss anymore. He was a father. And God help anyone who touched his family. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 50 floors above the chaos of Chicago. It smelled of sterile lemon polish and disuse. Lorenzo watched as Clara moved through the space, looking like a ghost haunting a museum. She touched the back of a velvet armchair, her fingers trembling slightly, before pulling her hand back as if the luxury burned her. "There are 3 bedrooms," Lorenzo said, his voice echoing in the vast living room. He felt awkward, a stranger in his own property, unsure how to speak to the woman who held his soul in her hands. "I'll have Rocco order whatever you need. Diapers, clothes, food. Just name it." Clara turned to him. She had dried her hair with a towel, and it fell in soft, messy waves around her face. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with red. "We don't need your charity, Lorenzo. We need safety. And the moment the sun comes up, I'm taking them and leaving." "You can't leave," Lorenzo said, frustration bubbling up. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the rain-lashed city. "You saw the text. You know how this world works. If Sophia knows, her father knows. And Don Valenti doesn't leave loose ends." "And whose fault is that?" Clara snapped, her voice rising. "I was a waitress, Lorenzo. I was a student. I didn't ask for Mafia wars. I didn't ask for a target on my back. Mommy!" A small, sleepy voice cut through the argument. Lorenzo froze. He turned to see the little girl, Mia, standing in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. She was clutching a worn-out, stuffed rabbit by the ear. She looked tiny against the marble floors. Clara's face softened instantly. The anger vanished, replaced by pure maternal instinct. She rushed over and scooped Mia up. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here. Go back to sleep." "I'm hungry," Mia whispered, peering over Clara's shoulder at Lorenzo. Her eyes were wide and dark, Clara's eyes. Lorenzo felt a lump in his throat. He had killed men. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with cartels. But this toddler staring at him made his knees weak. I can make pasta, Lorenzo blurted out. Clara looked at him surprised. You don't cook. I learned, he said quietly, after you left. The silence in the house was too loud. Cooking helped. An hour later, the scene in the kitchen was surreal. The most feared underboss in Chicago was wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, stirring a pot of marinara sauce, while two toddlers sat at the kitchen island, banging spoons on the granite counter. Leo the boy was watching Lorenzo with intense scrutiny. Are you a giant? Leo asked suddenly. Lorenzo paused the spoon hovering over the pot. He looked at the boy. No. Why? Mummy said Daddy was a giant who lived in a castle, Leo said matter-of-factly. But he got lost. Lorenzo's eyes shot to Clara. She was chopping vegetables, refusing to meet his gaze. A faint blush crept up her neck. She had told them about him, in her own way. I did get lost, Lorenzo said, his voice thick with emotion. He crouched down so he was eye level with his son. But I found my way back. Leo reached out and touched the expensive watch on Lorenzo's wrist. Tick-tock, he whispered. Do you like it? Lorenzo unclasped the Patek Philippe worth $50,000 and handed it to the 3-year-old. Here, it's yours. Clara gasped. Lorenzo, no. He'll break it. Let him break it, Lorenzo said, not looking away from his son. I don't care about the watch. I care about the time I missed. For a moment, the tension in the room broke. They ate together, the twins making a mess of the pasta sauce, smearing their faces. For 30 minutes, they weren't fugitives or Mafia royalty. They were just a family. Lorenzo watched Clara wipe sauce off Mia's chin, and he felt a physical ache in his chest. This was what he had wanted 3 years ago. This was what Sophia and her ambition had stolen from him. But the peace was shattered by the buzzing of his phone on the counter. Lorenzo picked it up. It was Rocco, who was stationed in the lobby downstairs. Boss, we have a problem. Lorenzo's demeanor shifted instantly. The father vanished. The capo returned. He walked to the corner of the room, turning his back on the children. Talk to me. I traced the number that sent you the threat. It's a burner, but the ping bounced off a tower in the north side, near the Valenti warehouse. That's not a surprise, Lorenzo muttered. Sophia is sloppy. There's more. Rocco hesitated. We pulled the security footage from your office building from 3 years ago, the day Clara got the box with the canary. And Boss, Sophia didn't deliver that box. She wasn't even in the country. She was in Milan for Fashion Week. The person who dropped the box off. It was a man. He was wearing a hat, but he walked with a limp. Left leg. Lorenzo's blood ran cold. The room seemed to tilt. A limp. Left leg. There was only one man in Lorenzo's inner circle with a limp like that. His uncle, Silas Moretti, his father's brother. The man who had raised Lorenzo after his parents died. The man who had pushed hardest for the alliance with the Valentis. Silas. Lorenzo whispered the name, tasting like ash. If Silas is involved, Rocco said urgently, then the penthouse isn't safe. He knows about this place. He bought the property under the shell company. Lorenzo spun around. Clara was laughing at something Mia had said, wiping the table. Rocco, get the car, now, we are leaving. Lorenzo. Clara stood up, sensing the shift in the air. What's wrong? You're pale. Get the kids, Lorenzo ordered, grabbing his suit jacket. He pulled a Glock 19 from the holster at the small of his back and checked the chamber. Clara screamed, pulling the children back. "Why do you have a gun? You said we were safe." "We aren't," Lorenzo said, moving to the door and locking the deadbolt. A futile gesture if they came with explosives. "We have to go. Now!" Before Clara could argue, the lights in the penthouse flickered and died. The entire apartment plunged into darkness. "Get down!" Lorenzo roared. He dove toward Clara and the twins, tackling them to the floor behind the heavy marble kitchen island, just as the front door exploded inward. The explosion wasn't a bomb. It was a battering ram hitting the reinforced steel, followed by the deafening crack of flashbang grenades. High-pitched ringing filled Lorenzo's ears. The twins were screaming a terrifying, piercing sound that tore at his heart. He covered their bodies with his own, pressing Clara's head down. "Stay down," he yelled into Clara's ear. "Do not move." Smoke filled the entryway. Through the haze, Lorenzo saw 4 figures moving tactically into the room. They wore black tactical gear, no insignias. Mercenaries. Pros. This wasn't a warning. This was an assassination. "Check the bedrooms," a voice commanded. Lorenzo recognized the voice. It wasn't Silas. It was Matteo Sofia's brother. The Valentis had sent their butcher. Lorenzo peeked over the marble island. He had the advantage of position, but they had the numbers. He took a breath, centered himself, and raised the Glock. Bang! Bang! 2 shots. 2 bodies hit the floor. "Contact kitchen," Matteo yelled. Bullets chewed up the marble countertop above Lorenzo's head, sending stone shards raining down on them. Mia was sobbing uncontrollably. "Clara," Lorenzo whispered, gripping her shoulder. "Listen to me. There is a service elevator behind the pantry. The code is 1984. Take the kids. Go down to the garage. Rocco will be there." "I'm not leaving you," Clara cried, her hands clutching his shirt. "You have to. They want me, not you. If I stay, I can hold them off. If we all run, we die." He looked at her, his eyes burning with intensity. "Go. Save our children." He kissed her hard, a desperate taste of goodbye, and then shoved her toward the pantry. "Go." Lorenzo stood up and fired 3 suppression shots, drawing the fire away from where Clara was crawling. He moved to the left, overturning a heavy oak table for cover. "Come and get me, you Valenti filth," he taunted. Another mercenary rushed him. Lorenzo didn't shoot. He didn't want to waste ammo. He waited until the man was close, then surged forward, grabbing the barrel of the man's rifle and driving his knee into the man's gut. He spun the man around, using him as a human shield, as Matteo opened fire. The mercenary slumped. Lorenzo shoved the body at Matteo and sprinted for the hallway, reloading as he ran. He needed to buy Clara time. Down in the garage, Clara was hyperventilating. She dragged the twins out of the service elevator. The garage was cold and dimly lit. "Rocco!" she screamed. The black SUV screeched around the corner tires, smoking. Rocco threw the door open without stopping the car fully. "Get in!" Clara threw the kids into the back seat and scrambled in after them. "Lorenzo, he's still upstairs." "I know," Rocco yelled, slamming the car into reverse and spinning it around. "He told me to get you out." "No." Clara grabbed Rocco's shoulder from the back seat. "We are not leaving him. Turn around. Clara, listen to me." Boom! A massive explosion shook the building above them. Debris and dust fell from the garage ceiling. "Lorenzo!" Clara screamed, her voice breaking. Rocco cursed, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. He looked at the elevator, then at Clara's terrified face, and finally at the twins, who were huddled together, shaking. "He's the toughest son of a bitch I know," Rocco said, his voice trembling. "But I have orders. My job is to protect the heirs." He floored the gas pedal. The SUV tore out of the garage, speeding into the rainy Chicago night. Clara twisted in her seat, watching the penthouse building recede. Smoke was billowing from the top floor, black against the dark sky. She felt a hollowness open up inside her that was worse than 3 years ago. 3 years ago she lost him to a lie. Tonight, she might have lost him to the grave. 2 hours later. The safe house Rocco took them to wasn't a penthouse. It was a gritty, run-down boxing gym in the South Side, owned by an old retired enforcer named Sal. Clara sat on a cot in the back office, the twins finally asleep under a wool blanket. She stared at the wall, numb. The door creaked open. Clara looked up, her heart hammering, hoping to see Lorenzo. It was Rocco. He looked grim. He was holding a phone. "Is he—" Clara couldn't finish the sentence. "He's alive," Rocco said. Clara let out a sob of relief, burying her face in her hands. "But," Rocco continued, his voice dark, "he's been taken." Clara looked up, confusion and horror warring in her eyes. "Taken by who, the Valentis?" "No," Rocco said. He turned the phone screen toward her. It was a news report. Breaking news. Shootout at downtown penthouse. Police confirm 1 suspect in custody. Lorenzo Moretti, high-ranking mob figure, arrested at the scene. "The police?" Clara asked. That's better than the Valentis, right?" "He has lawyers. He can get bail." Rocco shook his head slowly. "You don't understand, Clara. The police didn't just find him. They found him standing over Matteo Valenti's dead body. And they found the murder weapon. But it wasn't Lorenzo's gun." Rocco swiped the screen to show a leaked police photo. It showed a gun lying next to Lorenzo. "That's Silas's gun," Rocco said. "The old revolver he used to carry." "I don't understand," Clara whispered. "Silas framed him," Rocco explained, pacing the small room. "Silas sent the mercenaries to kill you, but he called the cops on Lorenzo. He knew if Lorenzo survived the hit, he'd be arrested for Matteo's murder. With Lorenzo in prison for life and the twins gone, Silas takes the empire." Clara finished, the horror of the betrayal sinking in. "And he continues the merger with the Valentis." "Exactly. Lorenzo is in a cage, Clara, a cage made by his own family. And the moment he steps into general population at Cook County Jail, the Valenti hitmen on the inside will shank him." Clara stood up. The fear was gone. The exhaustion was gone. She looked at her sleeping children, then at Rocco. "He saved us," she said, her voice steady. "Now we have to save him." Rocco looked at her skeptically. "Clara, with all due respect, you're a civilian. What are you going to do against the Moretti and Valenti families?" Clara walked over to her purse. She reached into a hidden lining she had sewn herself years ago and pulled out a small black flash drive. "I didn't just leave 3 years ago because of the threat, Rocco," she said, clutching the drive. "I left because I found something. While Lorenzo was asleep, I used to clean his office. I found Silas's ledger. The real one. The one that proves he's been skimming from the Valentis for a decade." Rocco's eyes widened. "You have proof that Silas has been stealing from the people he wants to merge with." "If Don Valenti sees this," Clara said, a cold, vengeful smile touching her lips, "he won't want to kill Lorenzo. He'll want to kill Silas." "That's a suicide mission," Rocco warned. "You have to walk right into the lion's den to deliver that." I'm not a waitress anymore, Clara said, putting on her coat. I'm the mother of the Moretti heirs. Take me to Don Valenti. The Valenti estate was less a house and more a mausoleum. It sat on 10 acres of manicured lawn, surrounded by high iron gates that seemed to scream, "Keep out!" Clara stood at the front gate. The rain had started again, a light drizzle that made the cobblestones slick. She was alone. Rocco was waiting a mile down the road, with the twins, the engine running. If she didn't call him in 30 minutes, he was to take the children and disappear forever. She pressed the intercom button. "State your business," a gruff voice crackled. "I have something for Don Valenti," Clara said, her voice unwavering. "Tell him it concerns the money Silas Moretti has been stealing from him." Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then the heavy iron gates groaned and began to swing open. Clara walked up the long driveway. She felt small, exposed. She was walking into the home of the man who had ordered the hit on her family just hours ago, but she clutched her purse tight. The flash drive inside was her only weapon. 2 armed guards met her at the massive oak doors. They patted her down, roughly taking her phone, but she refused to let go of the purse. "The drive is in here," she said. "I give it to the Don, no one else." They led her into a study that smelled of cigars and old leather. Don Valenti sat behind a desk that looked like it belonged in the Oval Office. He was an old man, his skin like parchment, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and cruel. Standing next to him, sipping a glass of scotch, was Silas Moretti. Clara's heart stopped. Silas was here. Of course he was. He was celebrating his victory. "Well," Silas chuckled, setting his glass down. "The little waitress. I must say you're harder to kill than I expected. Did you come to beg for your life?" Clara ignored him. She looked straight at the Don. "I came to make a trade. You have nothing I want," Don Valenti said, his voice a dry rasp. "Your boyfriend is in a cell about to be shanked by my men. Your children are next. Why should I listen to you?" "Because," Clara said, pulling the flash drive out, "Lorenzo didn't kill your son. Silas did." Silas laughed, a loud, booming sound. "Desperate lies from a desperate woman. Valenti, let me finish her. It'll be quick." Silas reached for the gun inside his jacket. "Wait." Valenti held up a hand. He looked at Clara with curiosity. "Go on." 3 years ago," Clara said, her eyes locking onto Silas. "Silas sent me a threat to make me leave Lorenzo. He wanted Lorenzo isolated, distracted. Why? Because Lorenzo was looking too closely at the shipping logs. "Lorenzo is a fool," Silas spat. "Lorenzo is a businessman," Clara corrected. "He noticed the numbers didn't add up, but I found the real ledger. Silas has been skimming 20% off the top of every shipment you two have done together for a decade. The customs fees, the lost cargo. It wasn't bad luck, it was him." Clara tossed the flash drive onto the mahogany desk. It landed with a soft click. "Check it," she challenged. "Folder named Retirement. It has bank accounts in the Caymans, under his name, not the family's." Silas's face turned a shade of purple. "She's lying. This is a fabrication." Valenti didn't speak. He picked up the drive and plugged it into his laptop. He clicked a few times. The room was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock. Valenti's eyes scanned the screen. He scrolled down. Then he stopped. He looked up at Silas. The look was not one of anger. It was one of pure, cold disappointment. "Silas," Valenti said softly, "what is this account number? I don't know what she planted there." Silas stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Valenti, we have a deal. I give you the Moretti territory. You give me the seat. You were selling me territory you were already stealing from," Valenti murmured. He closed the laptop. "Kill her!" Silas screamed, pulling his gun. "She's poisoning you!" But before Silas could raise the weapon, the two guards behind him moved. In a blur of motion, they grabbed Silas's arms, wrenching the gun from his hand. "You don't steal from me, Silas," Valenti said, standing up slowly. "And you certainly don't kill my son and blame it on my partner." "Partner?" Silas gasped, struggling against the guards. "Lorenzo," Valenti said. "He is young. He is arrogant. But he is honest. You are a parasite." Valenti nodded to the guards. "Take him to the basement. I want to ask him about every single dollar." "No, Valenti, wait!" Silas screamed as he was dragged out of the room. His voice faded down the hallway, replaced by the heavy thud of a door closing. Valenti turned his gaze back to Clara. She was trembling, the adrenaline crashing. "You have guts," Valenti admitted. "Most people would have run." "Call off the hit," Clara said, her voice shaking. "Call the jail, now." Valenti picked up the phone. "I will do more than that. I will make a call to the district attorney. It seems a new witness has come forward regarding my son's murder. A witness who saw Silas pull the trigger." Clara let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 3 years. "Go home to your children," Valenti said, sitting back down. "And tell Lorenzo. We have much to discuss." Cook County Jail was a concrete intestine smelling of sweat, bleach, and misery. Lorenzo sat on the metal bunk in the holding cell. He was still in his blood-stained suit, stripped of his tie shoelaces and belt. He looked like a fallen king. The other men in the cell, petty thieves and drug dealers, gave him a wide berth. They knew who he was. They knew the price on his head. Lorenzo stared at the graffiti scratched into the wall. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of dying without telling Clara he was sorry. Sorry for not protecting her 3 years ago. Sorry for the lost time. "Moretti." A guard banged on the bars. "Lawyers here. Movement." Lorenzo stood up. He didn't have a lawyer. Not yet. He was handcuffed and led down a long, flickering corridor. But they didn't take him to the visitation room. They took him to the processing discharge area. The guard uncuffed him. "You're free to go." Lorenzo rubbed his wrists, confused. "What? Charges dropped." The guard grunted, handing him a plastic bag with his wallet, watch, and belt. "Witness recanted, or something. DA declined to prosecute. Get out of here before they change their mind." Lorenzo didn't ask questions. He dressed quickly, his mind racing. Clara. It had to be Clara. He burst out of the jail doors into the cool night air. A black SUV was waiting at the curb. Not a police car. His car. Rocco was leaning against the hood, grinning. And standing next to him, wrapped in a trench coat, was Clara. Lorenzo stopped. He felt like he was seeing a miracle. Clara ran to. He caught her, lifting her off her feet, burying his face in her neck. She smelled like rain and vanilla, the only scent that had ever brought him peace. "You crazy woman," he whispered into her hair, his voice breaking. "What did you do? I fixed it," she sobbed, holding him tight. "I went to Valenti." Lorenzo pulled back, looking at her with awe and terror. "You went to Valenti alone, Clara. He could have killed you." "He didn't," she said, wiping her tears. "I showed him Silas's ledger. Silas is handled." Lorenzo closed his eyes, resting his forehead against hers. "Silas. He's gone, Lorenzo. It's over. The threat is gone. And the kids? Lorenzo asked, looking around frantically. In the car, Rocco said, opening the back door. Lorenzo looked inside. Leo and Mia were asleep in their car seats, oblivious to the war that had been fought for them. Lorenzo looked back at Clara. I don't deserve you. No, you don't. She smiled weakly. But you have a lifetime to make it up to me. Lorenzo took her hand. He looked at the prison behind him, then at the family before him. Let's go, he said. Take us to the airfield. We are leaving. Leaving? Rocco asked. Boss, you just won. The city is yours. Silas is out. Valenti owes you. I don't want the city, Lorenzo said, looking at his sleeping children. I want a life. Valenti can have Chicago. I have everything I need right here. Rocco nodded, a newfound respect in his eyes. He opened the door for them. As they drove away, the lights of the jail faded into the darkness. Lorenzo held Clara's hand the entire way, refusing to let go as if checking she was real. The rain had finally stopped. In its place, a crisp, golden autumn afternoon settled over the private airfield. Lorenzo stood by the open door of the Gulfstream jet, watching Leo and Mia chase each other across the tarmac. They were laughing, their squeals of joy echoing in the open air, a sound that was foreign to this place of business and cold exchanges. But one Lorenzo decided he would get used to. He turned to Clara. She was leaning against the fuselage, watching the twins with a soft smile. The stress lines around her eyes were fading, but the strength she had discovered that night in the rain was still there. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a partner. Are you sure about this? Clara asked, looking at him. Leaving Chicago. The Valentis. The business. I'm not leaving the business completely, Lorenzo said, stepping closer to her. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the knuckles. Rocco can run the day-to-day. The Don respects him now. But I'm done being a soldier, Clara. I'm a father now. I can't rule a city if I can't even tuck my kids into bed. Italy will be nice, Clara mused. Quiet, a vineyard, no guns. No guns, Lorenzo promised. Just wine pasta and... this. He reached into his pocket. This time there was no rain, no traffic light, no screaming fiancée. He dropped to one knee on the tarmac. Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The twins stopped running and watched their eyes wide. Lorenzo opened the velvet box. Inside sat a diamond not flashy or gaudy, but flawless and clear. I bought this 3 years ago. Lorenzo said, his voice thick. I carried it every day. I told myself I'd sell it, throw it away. But I never could. Clara Jensen, you are the only person who ever saw me. Not the boss. Just me. Will you marry me? For real this time? Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak. Yes, she whispered finally. Yes, Lorenzo. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and kissed her a kiss that tasted of freedom and a future that belonged to them, not to the family history. Daddy! Leo yelled, running over and hugging Lorenzo's leg. Mia followed, wrapping her arms around his other leg. Lorenzo laughed, a genuine, deep sound. He scooped them both up, one in each arm. Ready to go to the castle? He asked them. Yeah, they cheered. Lorenzo looked at Clara. She was smiling, truly. Smiling. He looked back at the city skyline in the distance. He had spent his whole life building an empire of fear, but looking at the woman and children in front of him, he realized he had been building the wrong thing. This, the laughter, the trust, the love. This was the only empire that mattered, and he would burn the world down again to keep it. "Let's go home," Lorenzo said. They boarded the plane, the stairs retracting behind them, sealing them off from the past forever. As the jet climbed into the sky, leaving the shadows of Chicago behind, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in light. And that is the story of how a Mafia boss found his heart at a red light. Lorenzo and Clara proved that sometimes the hardest wars aren't fought with guns, but with the courage to forgive and the strength to protect the ones you love. What did you think of Clara's bravery? Would you have walked into the Don's house to save the man who broke your heart? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, redemption, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy revenge drama coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.